my name is Amanda, and this is Hannah, and welcome to our What's Next event. We're both a part of Crew, and so is Asher, Grace, Jules back there, and Christy, which stands for Campus Crusades for Christ, and it's the Christian club at UW-Eau Claire-Barron County. We are an active ministry where our hope is to reach every student in some way on campus. One of Crew's biggest prayers is that students know and understand that even when things are tough, we all know that school can be overwhelming at times, that we can find peace with God. As we were praying about what tool we could prepare for students on campus to find peace in decision making when it comes to a career, because that's just a very tough decision in general. I feel like there's a lot of pressure. We felt that bringing community members together to talk about their experiences was the best way. We have asked 3 different community members with 3 different careers to join us. Today you will hear them speak on how they knew their career was the right one for them and hear about their own experience in their speeches. Hear about their own experience in their search for their career. Now, Christy is going to come up and she's going to share a few general tips before we get started.
I can stand. Like Amanda said, I'm Christy. I am one of the advisors for Crew and here at UW and then InterVarsity over at WITC. I think we have some WITC folks on the call right now as well. So my first question for you guys, if you just want to shout out your answers, is what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were little? Train driver? Nice. Thomas, sure, yes. Marine biologist, mom. A pilot, no, that'd be cool. Anyone else want to shout out theirs? Or you can throw them in the chat if people are wanting to chat there. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Some people are still waiting to grow up. Well, for me, I had, various phases, I think like most people did. I wanted to be a singer for a while, or a teacher. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I even wanted to be a graham cracker maker for a season. That was my aspiration in life. But I ended up going to college and getting an agricultural and environmental engineering degree. But then in the past 9 years, I've spent approximately 0 days being an engineer since I graduated from college. I debated, switching my major halfway through college to education or something like that. But long story short, finished the engineering degree. But since graduation, I've been hanging out on college campuses still and working with college students and getting to help them through this season of life. And so I think everyone at some point in their life experiences that moment, that question of, or sometimes multiple times, what am I doing with my life, right? And I think it's common for at least one of those times to come in the college time frame when you're trying to figure out classes and majors and internships and all of those things. And it can be, really overwhelming and I think especially if you came straight out of high school to college, it's kind of one of the first times where you feel like there's like options, like kind of your whole life has been set up for you up until this point. And then all of a sudden now you have like infinite roads ahead. And so either you don't know what you're going to do or you had a plan, but now you're here and you're like, I don't know if this is the right direction. If this is the best fit for me and maybe I should change my plans. And all of those questions just kind of come crashing in at different moments. All those decisions, all those crossroads. And so, like Amanda said, we wanted to do this today to just kind of give a few practical tips and just mental assurances, I guess, for those overwhelming moments, those crossroads moments, trying to make decisions, especially around, what am I doing with my life and purpose and all of those kind of big existential questions that we face. Since the conversation is hosted by Crew and InterVarsity, I'll make a couple references to faith and how that kind of has informed my journey, or just some different tips for that for people, but it's also going to include general things that will be applicable no matter what your spiritual beliefs are at this point. So I think my first thing that I just wanted to remind people of was just breathe, and it's going to be okay. And like, it feels like the world's crashing in and everything's falling apart maybe, but it's really not. And I think sometimes we can really like over spiritualize or even just over over dramatize the process of like, I need to find my destiny, I need to find my fate, I need to find God's call for my life, and if I miss it, then I'm like, screwed for the rest of my life. And I don't think that's actually how it usually how God works, or how it usually works, or even just life in general. There's a lot of possibilities. I liked this quote from a book that my friend shared with me. He said, too often, the author is Kevin DeYoung in the book Just Do Something. Too often, God's people tinker around with churches, jobs, and relationships, worrying that they haven't found God's perfect will for their lives. Or even worse, they do absolutely nothing, stuck in a frustrated state of paralyzed indecision, waiting and waiting and waiting for clear, direct, unmistakable direction. But God doesn't need God doesn't need to tell us what to do at each fork in the road. He's already revealed his plan for our lives, to love him with our whole hearts, to obey his word, and after that, to do what we like. Now, sometimes people do experience like a really specific call from God to do something really specific. But I think from what I've seen in the Bible or just in people's stories, it often like ends up coming to them. It's not them like trying to search it out and find it, but it kind of comes to them in the midst of the things they're already doing, those experiences. Like Moses in the burning bush, right? He wasn't like wandering the desert trying to find God's will for his life. God's will. God showed up with a specific thing he had for Moses. So don't worry about missing it or messing it up. There's a lot, even just in today's world, there's a lot more flexibility, I think, and it's not uncommon to change jobs, change careers, all those kind of things. Nothing is permanent at any point in life, really, especially in regards to career and vocation and things like that. And so if you are feeling stuck in that like place of indecision, I would just say try something, do something, see what it's like, see if you like it, see if you don't like it, and either of those results can be helpful to realize you do like something or you don't like something. And there's a lot of cool times during college, like little like gaps that you have, like winter break, you've got like a month or 6 weeks or whatever to kind of do whatever, and you've got these summer breaks where you can take classes and work and all those things, but you also have opportunities to do internships or travel somewhere new or take a risk and do something really random that you wouldn't normally do and you wouldn't have an opportunity to do in another season of life. So yeah, that's okay. I guess one other caveat too, on the flip side, if you do have a goal or like a plan and you feel really good about it, it's okay that you haven't tried every other thing in the world and you just feel good about it, then that's great. And you don't have to feel like you need to try 1,000 things to make sure it's the best thing, and that's okay too. So whichever end of that spectrum you're on, it's going to be fine. Then the second thing is more of the practical stuff, just think about what your skills and your passions and your gifts and your different goals are in life. I have a sheet that I handed to people who are here in person, and I'll put the link in the chat after I'm done here, to just a list of like questions you can think about that I thought were helpful, and different resources that you can use. At this point in life, maybe it's just thinking about what classes or clubs that you really liked thus far in your life. Or, there's different personality tests or skills assessments that you can use to help kind of articulate some of the things that you might be interested in or where you might thrive. It can also maybe be helpful to think about some of the goals you have, because different careers just have different realities of, a construction worker has a different lifestyle and reality and schedule than a teacher or a photographer, or just different people, or a nurse. There's just different things that are part of the career choice. It's not just about, it comes with a lifestyle sort of at the same time. Or a farmer, right? Asher's a farmer, so it's a very different lifestyle than some of these other careers. And so that's like, not one is not better than the other. It's just thinking about yourself and what kind of rhythms and lifestyle you want to have, and recognizing what that career you're choosing comes with. Like construction is really busy during the summer and less busy during the winter, and some people really like that and that works for them. Other people like more of the teacher schedule where the summer is really chill and the school year is more busy. And so just thinking about those gifts, those skills, those goals that you have and how you could use them. But also recognizing nothing is going to be exactly perfect. Like nothing is going to check every single box and fulfill every single desire of your heart. That's why you have time outside of work to do other things that you also like to do. And you can find, like some of my coworkers, since we do a lot of talking with people and that sort of thing, but some people really like to have that like tangible, output, like, oh, I made something. But you don't really get that with people. You can't be like, hey, look, I made some. I mean, because it's more of a process and it's not like a defined finish point. So they like to do a lot of like do-it-yourself home improvement projects to just kind of have an outlet and a venue for that kind of hands-on, let's do a project and complete it, which you don't always get in the more like interpersonal kind of careers. My last note that I'm going to say is just to remind you as well that your purpose isn't out there somewhere, but it's also today and in the present. So even as you're thinking about all these future decisions and future plans, don't miss today. And you're not going to be fulfilled once you have a career or, have all these things lined up. Though a lot of people do prefer working to having homework and exams and things like that, and that's okay. But if you don't feel like you have purpose today, just getting a job won't necessarily fix that in your life. And so there's opportunities right now, to be able to serve and use those like passions and stuff that you were thinking about, to be able to do that stuff now and not just wait until you graduate. There's people around you now on campus who you can serve and who you can help on that journey. There's a verse, Asher really likes Ecclesiastes, so there's a verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, which is a book in the Bible written by King Solomon, who's like one of the richest, most powerful men in the world, especially at that time, but really ever in a lot of ways. But he wrote, even as he's reflecting on his really amazing life, he said, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So if we keep chasing the next thing, the next job, the graduation, the promotion, the next vacation, whatever it is, we'll never have that contentment or even just have that feel like we found our purpose. So as a Christian, I believe that our fulfillment and purpose comes from that relationship with God. There's nothing that outside of that that's going to make us like fully content until we know that we're loved unconditionally. And so, yeah, for me, that like full life that God talks about offering, abundant life, is something that I've experienced outside of all the external things and all the achievements and all the things that I had growing up. Nothing really satisfied me until I was like resting in my relationship with God. So if you're interested in talking more about how God fits into finding your purpose and things like that, we'd love to talk about that with you more. We're going to also post later a little link where you can just fill out a online form to say you want more information about crew and events, or about just wanting to continue the conversation about careers. So yes, regardless of where you're at spiritually with what you believe, don't let thinking about tomorrow keep you from feeling like you have a purpose today. I'm going to close with this poem that I thought was cool. It's originally written in Portuguese, but it's called The Way is Made by Walking by Antonio Machado. Wanderer, your footsteps are the road and nothing more. Wanderer, there is no road. The way is made by walking. By walking, one makes the road, and upon glancing behind, one sees the path that will never be trod again. Wanderer, there is no road, only wakes upon the sea. So now some of those general principles that I shared are going to kind of come to life as Hannah introduces our panel, and we get some real life stories of how that's looked like over different people's journeys. So here you go, Hannah. I don't know if you want this.
Hi, as Amanda stated earlier, I'm Hannah, and I'm here to moderate our questions and introduce our panelists. The two questions the panelists will be answering are the following. How did you get to where you are today? What were the steps and decisions you made to get there? And how did you know your career was the right one for you? At the end, we will be having a Q&A where you may ask questions if you have them. Please make sure you state the name of the panelist you would like to answer that question. Our first panelist is Vicki Hultman, owner of Seasons Photography out of Rice Lake, Wisconsin. You can come on.
is just throwing me right into this. But are you going to ask me the questions?
So
Okay. 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 So my name is Vicki Haltman. My business is Seasons Photography. I've been a photographer, had my own business for 20 years. And how did I get here? It was a journey. My degree is in interior design because I needed to choose something, and I really do have an interest in design, beautiful things. And so it definitely works with what I'm doing now as a photographer, but I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But yeah, so my degree is interior design. I wanted to be a mom, was the first thing I wanted to do. And when I became a mom, I went to a photographer and said, could I trade work for pictures of my new baby? So I started just working with somebody else, and that's what I really wanted to do, was work for someone else rather than having my own business, because I grew up on a dairy farm, and although I loved the life, I felt like we were always having to work day and night, and the way my parents ran the farm, we couldn't go away from it. So I thought, I don't want that to happen to me. I want to work for someone else, because then I can clock out. But with having children and that being my priority at the time, I needed to make a change and decided to go home. I ultimately started doing little jobs here and there and kind of got into photography that way. So it was something I could do from home while I was there with my children. That's not an easy thing to do. But over the years, I was able to figure that out. So that's kind of how I got here. How do I know my career is the right one? I feel like maybe there's a few careers I could do that I could enjoy. And I agree with what Christy was saying. I'm a Christian too, so my perspective is that whatever I do, I should do it to the glory of God. So no matter where I am or what I'm doing, I should do my best. I should do it to the glory of God. My intention is to try to be a blessing to other people through what I do. Make relationships is really my motivation for this particular career. I'm not like a techie gadget kind of person. I'm a relationship person. So I love people. I love families. And it's just a way that I could take my artistic side, work from home, manage my own hours, and make relationships with people, and hopefully make a difference in their lives and in supporting the value of, family and the people that we, have in our lives. So yeah. That's sort of open-ended. Yeah, I think a lot of what Christy was saying, I totally agree with. Just taking what you like and working it into the job that you have. I mean, obviously, not obviously to you guys, but I would hate, sitting behind my desk all day is one of the things I like the least, is sitting in front of my computer and doing administrative tasks. So I wouldn't choose to be like an administrative assistant or a secretary or I don't know. But as a business owner, it's part of what I need to do. So I did not naturally come with business skills. I got training. Since I started my business, I've taken a lot of business courses, learned about pricing, marketing, running a business efficiently. Sometimes there's always more that I can learn, but then I've also had to learn the skill of photography. And so all of that, I'm a lifelong learner. So I love to learn new things. There's always a little learning curve on everything I do, but I want to keep learning, keep being fresh, keep being able to to do new things. Yeah.
Thank you, Vicki. You can go sit down. So our second panelist is Ben Bay, who is owner of Accent Concrete and Construction out of Barron County, and he will be joining us remotely. Ben, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you for having me today.
So again, our first question is, how did you get to where you are today? And what were the steps and decisions you made to get there?
Okay. That could be a pretty long answer, honestly, but so I do construction and am currently in the process of doing some different things with that, with scaling and getting larger, and even adding some other aspects to the company. I grew up doing construction, so my dad was involved in it and stuff, so I kind of learned the trade a little bit from that end. But I was always very motivated to pursue a career, I guess, or self-employment. So like Vicki, I ended up being self-employed, but through my life, there's been a lot of different opportunities that I could have chosen or taken, a lot of different things, even with construction and that stuff. And there's always hardship, like no matter what career you take or anything like that, there's always difficulties that come. And one of the things that I believe the Lord used in my life to keep me where I am and to get me where I am today is just perseverance. I've never been scared to fail, and I think it's really good for anyone, no matter what career path you take or anything in life. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. That's going to happen. It's natural. Don't be afraid of that. Don't get scared and give up. Or sometimes, I see a lot of people, younger people going through resumes and stuff like that in interviews. And as soon as something gets hard in a career, they quit and they move on to something else. And for me, that just wasn't kind of built in for me. I was willing to accept failure and learn from that. So that's kind of how I got to where I am, the position I am today, is largely just working through those difficult times, kind of staying the course with the construction thing. And then as far as the steps to get there, it took me a little bit, but by God's guidance, I came to a spot where I realized that I needed a plan. So I kind of laid out for myself several steps essentially to pursue so that I could do better at what I was doing and get more committed in that. And first being defining what success means to me. That was really critical because it's really difficult to know where you're going or to get where you want to go if you don't actually know where you're going. That would be a better way to put it. So defining what success was and going through that process was huge because I realized that success really wasn't monetary. I think a lot of times we think, oh, I want the career with the best paycheck at the end of the day or the most free time. And those things aren't necessarily the most important once you get a little further down in life. And I think Christy did a great job explaining some things with that. And then secondly, I had to learn how to learn. In school, obviously, you learn a lot of material and those things, but after I got out of school, I realized I didn't really know how to be an active learner. I thought once I had a little bit of information, I kind of understood it, I was good to go. But I had to get to a position in my mindset where I was always learning, actively learning. And then obviously once you get information, you need to actually apply that information. And then one of the bigger things for me in this plan for myself and for moving forward with my career and life in general was to be able to evaluate myself accurately. I do a lot of evaluation and I do that scheduled and more consistently now than I did in the past. But being able to actually take a real look at, where I'm strong at and the things that I am weak in to be able to come up with a plan to make corrections. You can get a kind of a euphoric view of who you are as a person and your capabilities, but that's not necessarily always accurate. So it's been super beneficial for me to get where I am now to be able to accurately evaluate my strengths and my weaknesses and be real with myself with that.
And then so the second question was, how did you know your career was the right one for you?
That one was almost a little more difficult for me to answer, to be honest. So I went to college, like most all of you, and I got a degree, and I was encouraged to pursue school, pursue more or less a white collar career. And I had always done construction, stayed doing it, and whatever. But for about, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, somewhere in that range, I always wanted to get out of construction and pursue something else. I heard about the easier things to do, an office job, getting good pay that way, whatever. And so I was kind of always like searching for this other thing, this better career, the shiny object, essentially. And about 10 or 15 years in, I realized, it was probably closer to 15 when I really committed to it, but I realized I'm actually good at what I do, and I had been doing it long enough at that point where I had respect in that realm, in that world, and I decided to just commit to it. It wasn't like I had this great epiphany, like I just, this is for sure the career for me. I'm going to love construction for the rest of my life. Again, kind of going back to what Christy said, God doesn't always give you that crystal ball moment where you know exactly where you're supposed to be. But I just got to the point where I became content in where I was and decided to commit the remainder of my time in a career to construction and areas surrounding that.
And so is there any other pieces of advice that you think would be helpful to people?
I think, going to college is great, and I'm definitely not saying don't do that or use that, but don't be afraid to go towards skilled trades. Skilled trades are really excellent. It's a great thing to be involved in and to learn from. I guess with that, whatever you decide to do outside of school, once you start making some changes, stay with it long enough that you work through the hard part. Usually 6 months, a year in, 2 years in, something like that, things start to get more difficult. Well, usually that's because you're learning something new. And I see that a lot, like with the skilled trades, especially, obviously being in it. But it's actually okay to work through that difficulty. And once you get through the hardship stage of it, it actually becomes more fun and exciting because you've actually developed some skill and efficiency with that. And it doesn't really matter what the career is, but just persevere through the difficult times.
Thank you, Ben, for that. And so our last panelist is Glenn Pearson, owner of Dairy Farm Services from Frederick, Wisconsin. Okay, yep, that's fine. Yep.
How's that? That's on.
So our first question was, how did you get to where you are today, and what were the steps and decisions you made to get here?
Okay, well, I'm kind of the opposite of Vicky here. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I ended up on a farm. Lots of farms. I grew up in Illinois. Did very well in school and sports, and got asked to play soccer at the Air Force Academy on a scholarship. So right there, as a junior in high school, I had to make a decision, and I decided not to. So I went to a smaller Division III school and played there, Lake Forest. And through that whole period, up through undergrad, I knew where I wanted to be when I grew up, and that's up here in northern Wisconsin. Because we visited up here, and I just love the area, love the people. And I also realized I didn't want to work inside. So I had a couple things figured out already. By the time I got to undergrad, I was excelling in biology and chemistry and physics and all the sciences. So I started to get an idea of where God was leading me. And then the brother of the girl I was dating was going to vet school. And he asked me, he says, here you are, sophomore in college. What are you going to do with your life? And I said, I don't know. I'm good at these classes, but I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, well, I'm in vet school down at University of Illinois. Come down, spend a weekend. I'll show you what vet school is all about. Went down there and like, wow, I like animals a lot, especially when I can help them. So before that, I was kind of getting pushed toward human medicine, but I knew I don't want to listen to other people's gripes and groans, and so I said most animals don't talk, so I'm going the veterinary route, and it was as subtle as that. So I applied. I got in early to vet school. Came out in '85 out of vet school. So I knew where I wanted to be up here. I knew I wanted to be outside, and I loved cattle. I found that out in vet school. So sure enough, I got my first job up here in Cumberland, worked 15 years in a group practice. And after about 15 years, things were changing. The farms were getting a lot bigger, and a lot of the smaller farms that I had worked on were disappearing. So I split off and started my own business, my own consulting business in year 2000. So I've been doing that for 21 years, specifically working on, initially it was transitioning the small dairies into large dairies and all the changes that bring about. And now it's helping the large dairies manage the herds they have. So that's how I got here.
And so the second question is, how did you know your career was the right one for you?
Well, the first 15 years I wasn't so sure, because during those years I was on call every other weekend and 2 nights a week and getting called out of the house in all hours. So during that phase, I had to convince myself it was the right move. But like what Ben said is, if something isn't going perfect in your career, I wasn't going to jump out of it and go do something else. I just said, I'm learning from this. God's leading me here. He's teaching me things, so that when the decision to split out of that practice, it was a lot easier saying, now I'm my own boss, no on-call, no emergency, using more of my skills, mental and intelligence, than physical. So I'm convinced.
And so are there any other pieces of advice you'd like to offer?
Yeah, this is something that came to me, 15 years ago, probably 20. I don't know how many of you know the movie Miracle on Ice. Okay, it's a movie about the 1980 U.S. hockey team that defeated the Russians and actually won the gold medal. Okay, and I actually got to eat dinner with Herb Brooks once. I didn't deserve it, but I was eating dinner with him. Here I was at the table, and he's asking me about my hockey coaching career. Anyway, in the middle of the movie, toward the beginning actually, the U.S. hockey team beat Iceland or Finland or something, and he wasn't happy with the way they played. So after the rest of the teams left the ice, he called the USA guys out and had them doing Herbies, they're called, where you skate to the blue line back, red line back, far blue line back, and he had them doing that for hours. Anybody remember that scene? Okay. If you play basketball, they're called crushers, but basically the idea is to project a message to the players that you got to commit. And several times toward the end, he stopped them and said, he'd call out a player and say, who do you play for? Guy from New Hampshire said, UNH. And then he'd send them on a couple more. And he did that 2 or 3 times until Mike Ruzioni, the captain, Herb Brooks said, who do you play for? And Ruzioni shouts out, United States of America. That's it, boys, to the locker room. And I started thinking, as I'm helping producers and working with producers, I don't say, who am I playing for? I say, who am I working for? Like Vicki said, everything we do, we're working for God first. Okay, so everything you do, keep that in mind. And you do that by serving others, making their lives better, so that when you lay down at night, you can look and say, okay, I did everything I could today for the people that I contacted. So that's the thing to remember. Who do you work for? Number one.
Thank you, Glenn. And if you'd like to stay up here, and I'll have Vicki come on up, because now we will begin our Q&A. And remember, when you have a question, to state to which panelist you are asking the question to. If you are online and have a question, feel free to leave your question or questions in the chat box. Now, does anyone here have a question? Ben, did you hear that?
I did not, no.
Can you hear me now, Ben?
Yes.
Okay. So my question was, when you were talking, you talked about how you try to routinely evaluate yourself, and so you can identify your strengths and your weaknesses, and you use that as kind of a launch pad into the next year or months or whatever it is. So I'm just wondering, what does that look like? What do you what kind of questions do you ask yourselves? Do you involve other people? What does that self-evaluation look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically, now I'll tell you what it looks like now, because I went through some different phases of this. I am married, so I always ask my wife before I go on my self-evaluation time or for that time. I ask her what she thinks are my weaknesses, because obviously she could say all kinds of different things, but she knows me better than anybody else. So I always ask her. And I do try to make it a point to involve closer friends or even people that I'm working with and stuff like that. Usually my lead people, if there's an area that they think that we need to work on, whether that's in the company or even in my leadership ability or whatever, so that I get a little bit of an outside perspective on it. Then typically I actually go away for a weekend. I do 2 days, 1 night usually, and I take my Bible and a notebook, and then I usually don't get too much more in depth, like as far as bringing material and that sort of thing. When I go, I start out by just writing down my thoughts. Thinker, I'm a visionary, so I always have more thoughts than I do. And if you don't believe me, ask Amanda. But anyways, yeah, so I write down all that stuff. Like I just kind of like mind dump, empty everything that I've been thinking about, paper. And once I get all of that out, I spend some time in prayer, and then I spend some time reading the scriptures, and then I start writing down more specifically questions like I break down my business, what things in my business do I need to work on? And that's a little tough to get like all the detailed questions into because there's so much going on. But I try to break the business down into smaller segments so I can ask more specific questions about what's going well or not. And then with my parenting or children or ministry that we're involved in, I do the same thing. I break down specific questions, which things are going well, what is not going well, why is it not going well, or why is it even going good? That way you can break up and get a little better clarity on those things. And then I just spend a lot of time like actually thinking, really meditating on it, digging deep into my mind, trying to figure out solutions to those problems or answers to those questions. And that's usually what the week looks like. But by the end of the week or weekend, I try to always have a plan in place for the next 3 to 6 months, depending on which evaluation time I'm going for. I try to do 2 a year. So I guess that's kind of the basic of it.
Okay, and then there was a question for Vicky. Were there any influential people in your life who helped you when you were making your decisions about your future and career?
Probably a lot of people, I guess. Yeah, when I decided to start my photography business, I obviously consulted my husband. We talked about the pros and cons and what we would do with that. As I got further into it, I realized that I needed to become part of a bigger association of photographers, and I joined the Professional Photographer Association. And I did, that's where I really learned a lot and was encouraged a lot. It's sometimes where I get ideas. So just being part of a bigger organization that's focused in the business of photography, and I've made friendships along the way through conferences and training and things I've done. So as far as my business goes, I try to develop relationships that are helpful in continuing to stretch myself and grow. And I have friends across the country that I sometimes call just to say, what are you doing about this thing? I don't know if that's answering the question, but yeah, I mean, I need people, so.
All right, my question I have is for Glenn. What is the biggest risk that you've ever taken?
I'd have to say leaving a solid income in a group practice back in 1999 and just saying, cash me out. I'm headed in this direction. I mean, I love dogs and cats, but my future is with dairy cattle and beef cattle, and taking all those assets and then piling them into a new business. That by far was the biggest career risk I ever took. Can I say one quick thing here? I don't want to forget it. That's the only reason. I just all the young people out here in Webland, you guys got to realize you're entering an employment market where employers like me and Ben and Vicky, I'm sure, we're looking for employees. Okay, so you're entering a very good market. So whatever you decide to do, you're going to be welcome.
My question is for everyone, so if someone, doesn't matter who answers this, but how did you know that your career, how do you know that your career is God's purpose for you?
I'll try to answer that. I know because I'm operating in my strengths, and I don't do it without the Lord, honestly. So, you know, every job, every person I'm meeting with, you know, I go to prayer prior to that, seeking the Lord's will in it, asking that He'd make me a blessing to them somehow. Like, my faith and my career are not two separate things. They're all the same. So my prayer is that I'm honoring the Lord in what I'm doing, bringing glory to Him rather than myself. And I know that He's had His hand on my business. So because of my faith, I know that I'm in His will in doing what I'm doing.
And I'd have to add to that similar thoughts that if you are in God's will, He will bless you. And I mean, even when you take a big risk like I did, 3 years later, I look back and go, oh, thank you, God. Obviously, that's the way I should have gone. I mean, so when you count your blessings and give credit to Him, pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Ben, do you?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind tagging on that. I think what both of them said is great. The only thing I wrestled with this a lot when I was a newer believer. I got saved in my early 20s from a very, non-godly life or ungodly life. And so I wrestled a lot with this whole construction thing or career thing and how that fit into God's will and plan and purpose for my life. And for me, it really came down to, in the scriptures, you don't see Ben supposed to be a carpenter or Vicky's supposed to be, a photographer or whatever. You see that we're supposed to become more like Christ. And I think when you're focused on your relationship with Jesus Christ, He gives you a contentment in whatever you're doing. And I think, we can get really hung up on, I need to be in the right field or the right aspect of a career income earning thing, when God is really a lot more concerned about your heart and your relationship with Him.
Okay, so this one's for everyone as well. So when you're looking at hiring someone or including someone in your business, what impresses you more, seeing that they've had so many jobs or their involvement in activities? I guess that's more of like not like a spiritual question, but more of like a applicable question, if that makes sense. So
I can jump on that one if no one else wants to right away. And I mentioned this briefly when I was speaking there, but one of the main things that I look for is some sort of commitment level with people. It costs a lot of money to train, a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort. And they jump in, and often we see people, 6 months, a year in, and they just start learning more difficult things, and they jump out. They move on to something else, the next shiny object. The next, maybe they're going to get 50 cents an hour or something. So when we're looking for employees for us, we really like to see that people are engaged and involved in things. If you've been in activities and you've been committed to that activity for 3, 4, 5 years, that's a big deal. And you guys are starting out of college. You may not have a lot of work experience, but as you do pursue looking for other careers and stuff, I would highly encourage you, don't jump out of a job in 6 months or a year or something like that. Employers, when they start seeing, every 6 months or a year, you've got a new career path, they're really not interested. Us for sure. So I would say really, really hone in on trying to actually make some commitments, now where you're at, stay with something and keep that going for an extended period of time so that you can show that you actually want to be part of a company and something. And when you do get hired, you help form that culture of that company. So if you're only there for a few months and you're always thinking, I'm going to leave, I'm going to get out of here, you never really build that relationship to keep that culture going. I saw my picture freeze there for a second. Sorry, I got distracted. Anyways, I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I would say prior job experience is definitely something we look for. But again, how long were they at the various jobs? We also see that. And I'll ask, why were you only here 3 months? And wait for an answer. Because the way I run my business, I say welcome to the family, because you're part of our business family now, so that anything that's upsetting you is going to upset us. So let's keep the communications open. I always say God's first, family second, our business is third. But we need to know about, if you need time off for a reason or whatever, that's fine, But it's heartbreaking when someone leaves early, because it's like a new member of the family that didn't stay around long enough to really benefit from the long-term relationships that we have. So most of my employees have been very, very long-term. So.
Well, Hannah actually works for me, and I know she's been involved in a lot of, clubs and a lot of things, and she's the kind of person who kind of will dig in and own it, do the work, and that's what she does with my business. So I think I want to just sort of address the question a little bit differently. I think that's more what I would be looking for. I tend to be hiring students as compared to career people, just because of where I'm at. I'd have to provide another person a full-time income, and that's not my goal really at this point. So I'm usually looking for part-time help. But I really appreciate that quality of being able to take ownership of the work you do, take pride in the work you do. It may not be your business, it may not be, your company or your reputation even, but those things should matter to you within a business. And so that really makes a difference for me to have somebody who will represent my business well, who takes ownership, is responsible, wants to learn, and wants to kind of grow and ask. Hannah's really great at asking questions that help her be better. They also help me be better. So I really appreciate those qualities.
Are there any other questions here that people might have?
So this is more for Glenn, but we talk, kind of the theme that you guys were talking about is endurance and perseverance and sticking with it. But also in all of your stories, you all had to make a decision at some point in time and pivot. So I think you had kind of that going on, especially when you had to jump ship and abandon. So do you have any? You all kind of talked about this, but do you have any tips like when you can see kind of a fork coming up in your life? Are there certain things you should be looking for? How do you evaluate that? How do you make that big pull and be like, all right, it's time to make a change? What were, in your experience, what were some things that you saw, and is there a way that you can maybe apply that in a general sense to what other people might be facing?
Well, being in a group practice like I was, that's definitely a family. I mean, you know everything that's going on with your partner's families, and so I saw some impending retirements. I saw a shift in the practice influence, and I knew where I needed to go. So, and talked with Elaine, my wife, about it, and we prayed about it, and she agreed. If that's what I feel the calling to do, time to do it is now, not after the practice has lost 2 senior partners and then I'm 50-50. So some of those things is knowing you got a decision or feeling you need to make a decision, and then realizing that there's decisions that need to be made today, next year, or 5 years away. And this one was coming on quickly, so I had to make the decision when I did. After obviously a lot of thoughts and prayers, and everything just started falling into place. And I should say this about my wife's career. She's in pharmaceutical sales, and at one point we decided, well, we're going to move our family from Cumberland up to Grand Rapids, Minnesota, 3 hours away. And that worked fine for my business because I was coming back to Wisconsin anyway. But for her, she was losing her whole sales territory. And she told her boss, we'd made this decision, we're going to move. And he said, well, you work it as long as you can. Maybe something will open up in northern Minnesota. It was like 3 weeks later. He calls her up. He says, I've never seen this before. We have a position that just opened up in northern Minnesota. And she right away said, well, I've been praying about it. And her boss was not a Christian. He says, what do you mean? He said, yeah, I was praying that something would open up to where I'm moving. And here the job is waiting for us when we got up there. So another case of let God direct your career. Everything will fall in place. Don't worry about making mistakes. It's all going to work out.
I have a response to that too. I've had a few forks in the road over the years, and just I do the business for a number of reasons, but at the end of the day, yes, I want to make money for my family. So what I intentionally try to do is continue to learn new things, look at what's happening. I have this saying that I don't want to be an old crusty photographer, meaning I haven't changed anything in years. I'm looking at what's happening, what I can learn, what I could do differently, and I look at, maybe who my competitors are and how could I do it differently? Like, what do I have that I could leverage for my own business? Like, I don't need to photograph everyone in Barron County. I just need, enough. And there is enough, but I want to continue to to stay on the forefront and be, as much as I can, I have sort of challenged myself to sort of be ahead of the next thing. So that's super fun, and it keeps me engaged in my business and interested in my business, and it helps me, I think, just to be able to continue.
Ben, do you have anything to add?
I think they did a great job answering.
So if there aren't any more questions, Amanda's going to conclude us.
Shocked. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, Ben, Glenn, and Vicki. I just really appreciate it. So, so if you have any other questions or any follow-up questions or anything, feel free to leave them in the chat box or come up to us and ask us, except you, Ben. You can't join us. I'm sorry. But yeah, and if you guys have any more questions about Crew or what we do on campus or want some more information or anything, feel free to contact us. Reach out to Christy, I, or Hannah, Grace, whoever. We're pretty open, kind of friendly. So, yeah. So, thanks again for joining us.